What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast with an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores A-N-T. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this episode of Disguise Coverage, we will be diving into the pain points for the 2025 Buffalo Bills and essentially having discussion of, as indicated in the title and on the graphic, a discussion on or of how did we get here? How did this Bills team that had, and I do want to preface all of this, I'll say this throughout the episode, but I'll say it now as well because this is the intro. I don't think the Bills are done or dead. I don't think this season is over. I definitely think things are very worrisome and very troublesome on both sides of the ball, and I don't think they're things that are easily rectified or fixed this year. And the fixes, even going forward, are another conversation that is potentially worrisome and troublesome, but we will discuss that as we go forward here. But I don't think the Bills are done. I don't think the season is over. I don't think, they should be completely written off. But nonetheless, this is a team that is floundering right now on both sides of the ball. They look just so disconnected and disjointed, and I'm reading the comments. Okay, Amori said, I woke up and Jordan Phillips just got displaced again. That's very funny. Connor saying, yo, what NBA jersey is that? This is a white Chicago Bulls Scottie Pippen jersey. Oh, I can't stand up enough so you can see the 33. There's the 33. This is a white Scottie Pippen Bulls jersey. He is arguably my favorite NBA player of all time. Shout out to you for noticing the jersey. Yeah, this team, they're floundering on both sides of the ball. I don't think this is news to anyone. I don't think that's revelatory or some shocking statement. But I do want to kind of trace how we got here, pick up the breadcrumbs, put all the puzzle pieces together to talk about how we got to this point here in 2025. Because I know there's a lot of conversation of who's to blame or what's to blame or what the problem is and the hows and the whys behind it all. And I think there's a lot of narratives that are out there based on, certain biases that people have. And even just kind of putting that within the backdrop or landscape of all the emotion and the frustration that's tied to where this team is right now. And as we always do here on the show, especially when things are tough here for the Buffalo Bills, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you folks have or you want to put into the chat, I will bring everything up as much as humanly possible, especially when I ride solo on these episodes. I love making these episodes as engaging and as engagement focused as possible. So anything you got, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to put it into the chat. I'll bring up everything as much as I can. Super chats, as always, get priority because I respect the monetary donation. And I see the color that's attached to them and it distracts me from my notes. I have several topics I want to get into tonight. I'm sure that will fit in largely with a lot of the frustrations and comments and things that you folks have into the chat. And we'll dive into things as we go forward here. But I kind of wanted to start with, kind of my theme for this episode and how it kind of came about. And I've said this before on the show, largely in like joking manners, but when the Bills lost in 13 seconds that game, a good chunk of like my fandom died. I was heartbroken and distraught with that loss. It was another creative way for the Bills to lose a game. It came on a very big stage in arguably the greatest football game, or at least NFL game I had ever seen. And the team it came against and how it came about, everything, just it completely gutted me. And between that and the way I see the game of football from an X's and O's standpoint and a schematic standpoint, and being in this podcast space and watching all the tape that I do and doing this on a regular basis, I started to appreciate the game more for just football, for the sport is what it was, more so than just being a Bills fan, even though I am 1000%, a Bills fan first and foremost when it comes to my fandom. But between a good chunk of my heart and soul dying in that game And then the way that I see the game and started to study it and learn more about it and enjoy it more schematically in X's and O's, I started to find myself not really getting frustrated too much when things wouldn't go the Bills' way. I wasn't too, torn down with how they lost to Cincinnati in the playoffs. This past loss to Kansas City in the playoffs annoyed me a good chunk because it was Kansas City again. And, not recognizing the corner blitz from the boundary and the drop from Kincaid, all the injuries to the defense the year before, I would get annoyed and bothered, but it was very rare for me to really get like legitimately frustrated. And I found myself after this loss to the Texans just not overwhelmingly frustrated, but extremely frustrated. And a lot of it is tied to the schematics of it. And a lot of it is tied to things that, and then I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, a lot of the struggles that we're seeing with this team and that we're going to talk about tonight are things that I've been talking about since last season, that I talked about the entirety of this offseason. Anywhere and everywhere that you saw or heard me, I was talking about worries for the run defense with how they built this defense, worries about what could happen to the offense if they didn't have true bucket getters on the outside and or a vertical presence or downfield presence in the offense, how everything could kind of just off of those two pain points. And we're going to talk about a couple more aside from that in this episode, but just how those two pain points alone could compound and make everything worse and scary for this team. And I talked about, guys they brought in and how they weren't really addressing or answering certain problems they had from last year. I talked about all these worrisome things. And so many of, as William says, the Bills have broken and fire McDermott. That's funny. So many of the things that I talked about is like, this could be really worrisome and they haven't addressed this. This could be a problem. So many of those things have come to fruition. And it's annoyed the hell out of me to the point that I found myself sitting here after this Texans game, or sitting there after the Texans game. And I just thought that game was such a representation. And you could say this about several games this year, but I thought it was such a good representation and microcosm of the struggles of this team on both sides of the ball. In one game, you saw what the run defense struggles lead to and how that's tied to who they brought in and what their roster building and philosophy and identity is on the defensive side of the ball. We saw the other side of the ball in the offense, as we've been seeing for weeks on weeks, where you have defenses that continue to just creep up and stack the middle and stack in between the numbers and the boundaries because they are not fearful of getting beat on the outside or getting beat vertical. And we've seen how that's gummed up the works for the offense. Everything has just been creeping up little by little. And the Texans game, I felt like, was such a culmination of all those things. And I found myself frustrated in a way that I have not been in a very long time. Even with 13 seconds, I was sad more than I was angry. I was truly sad when they lost in 13 seconds. And I haven't been angry like that with the Bills in a very long time, or even sports. Like, it takes a lot for me still to get like angry. I think the angriest I haven't been the three angriest things I've been in or times with sports of the last year. If anyone cares, this Bills loss to Houston, which may seem small compared to their playoff losses, but the Bills loss against Houston. I'm a Barcelona fan, so they're lost in the semifinals of the Champions League in the second leg against Inter Milan. Angered me. And then the Red Sox trading Rafael Devers. Those are the three angriest things I've been in the last year. And this Bills one, I just haven't been this angry with or about the Bills in a very, very long time. And I found myself up until, I don't remember, Thursday night, Friday morning, just angry, knowing I had to go to bed to get up for work and finish the week. But I was just frustrated. And I know a lot of you folks are frustrated, and it was just absolutely palpable how frustrated I was with this team. And so that caused me to kind of really not unleash, but really unravel and kind of dive in a little bit to the pain points of this team, because I do think I don't think what we're seeing is due to any one thing. I don't think the problems that we're seeing are on a small scale. I think the struggles we're seeing on both sides of the ball are large scale. They are systemic. They start from the top down positively. I think a lot of things start from the top down positively and negatively, but a lot of these pain points start from the top. They are woven in through the fabric and identity of this team schematically, individually, from a roster standpoint. And so I think we should talk about those things. And I'm going to go through the comments now as we do, and then we'll start to dive into those topics on this episode so we can all be angry together. Also, happy Thanksgiving. Oh, and I moved my hand too much. The camera went out of focus. This is just, everything just wants to make me angry. Fantastic. I'm going to stand up. Hopefully the camera comes back into refocus. There we go. There's the trick. We'll start with some comments here. Again, super chats. Feel free to put them throughout the episode. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns throughout the episode. But as we do here on the show, we'll start with some comments and thoughts from the live chat, and then we'll start to get into the meat of the episode. John, I just want to grab this because I saw it. John says, too young for the Music City Miracle. I was a little tight for the Music City Miracle, but I was more just shocked than anything. As I've gotten older, I'm angry. I thought it was a forward pass, and I couldn't believe that everybody and their mother, even as a little kid, I was like, why is everybody running after Frank Wycheck? Frank Wycheck running to the sideline. Clearly, he's not going anywhere. Why are we all selling out for Frank Wycheck? And also, I think my frustration started higher at the beginning because I couldn't understand how Doug Flutie wasn't starting. Obviously, we know why, years later, and Ralph Wilson being the one to make that call. I was so confused. Just as like a little kid, I just remember Flutie getting the Bills so much and doing so much and changing so much and how good their defense was. And I was so confused and angry to start the game that, Flutie wasn't playing. And then Johnson still kind of gets it done. He loses his shoe, still scrambles for a first down. So the Music City Miracle, as I've gotten older, I've gotten angry with it. But at the time, I was more just shocked and sad than anything at that time. I'm going to work my way back when I'm grabbing these ones just because I saw them first. Joe says, I view organizational direction and coaching philosophy like a piece of gum. It starts out great, but loses its flavor as you chew. I think the Bills need to get a new piece, maybe spearmint this time. I think that's a pretty good analogy. I like that. I like that. You know what goes great with spearmint gum? One pie pizza. Sorry, Joe. I'm just kidding. Jose in the beginning of the episode says, Brandon Cooks, good waiver wire pickup. We are going to talk about Brandon Cooks in this episode. My shorthand thoughts right now, meh, but we'll get into that a little bit. And Joe at the beginning said, drop a like for Andy, even though he bullies me over pizza choices. Yeah, that's fair. But, I mean, you did kind of bring this upon yourself. Cam Morey says he spotted AJ Klein and Mario Addison and Levi Wallace at Duff's. Oh, not great. Jose says, why can't Buffalo use Shakir correctly? I think this is a fair point, but also I don't think the notion of the wide receiver screens and everything he gets in and around the line of scrimmage is super crazy. Like his best skill set, best attribute, best trait, however you verbalize it or view that, is getting the ball in his hands and just doing work. So the quicker you can get the ball in his hands, I understand that notion, right? Like, let's get it to him quick. Let's get blockers out in front of him. Let's essentially treat him like a running back at the wide receiver position, get the ball to him, and then we'll kind of go from there. I think the issue with it is it's gotten just too predictable. And honestly, even there's other times where the numbers are favorable and Allen isn't hitting the screen. He's doing something else. But I do think he can work downfield a bit more. I do think he can work into the intermediate, I would say the high underneath to low to mid intermediate. I don't think he's a field stretcher. He's not some guy that's going to win vertical and do a bunch of stuff there. But I do think he's a guy who can work on digs and get more slants and get some outbreakers, some option routes. I do think he obviously can do more than just what he's doing. But I don't hate, sorry, if anybody sees me do this, is because the camera, I'm moving too much out of my frustration and the camera's losing focus. I don't think he's, completely being used incorrectly, especially with what his average depth of target was last year at certain points. But I do think just siloing him so much to that role in theory and in, kind of all practicality with how it's gone on is pretty frustrating. Charles says he's here to pay the bills. I like that. Oh, Connor says it has to start with 2023 in the Diggs trade. Oh, funny how things come full circle. And man, how everybody's kind of sung a different tune. Not saying that you have, but it's just funny seeing everybody be upset now that Diggs is gone after everybody was ready to drag him and jettison him into the sun. William says, maybe I'm in the minority, but I am glad Bean didn't trade away a first plus for Waddle. The team clearly has multiple holes with cap issues, and trading a first seems risky. I feel like you are probably in the minority, and as John after you says, yes, you are in the minority. I don't think that's a crazy notion either, because I don't think getting Waddle is something that makes up for all the other holes. Like, you do need to fix a good chunk of things on this team that you need draft capital for and finances for. But I do think getting Waddle could have gone a long way for the offense and opened things up and put you into a spot where it could help the defense from a game script standpoint. I would have given a first for Waddle, even though I think I think Waddle's more of a high end 2, low end 1. But he's a very good wide receiver. He's a very good player, and his skill set would have been so welcome in this offense. I would have done that trade. And I say that as a person who really values draft capital and really not giving it up unless the value is really tremendously there. Oh, Heather says about 13 seconds game. After 20 minutes of silence, I turned to my mom and said, quote, that might be as close as we ever come to a Super Bowl. Oh, God, yeah. Connor saying the defense feels like it's flipped. First half of the season, pass rush was good, but coverage was bad. Now it feels like the opposite because of the defensive line conundrum. You know what's funny about that? I put out things throughout the week and then I retweet them so that way they're at the top of my Twitter feed so I can easily just grab them here for episodes. Joey Bosa was a large part of why the pass rush was really cooking early on in the year. He was getting pressures. Even though he wasn't getting a ton of sacks, he was getting QB hits. He was getting pressures. He was forcing fumbles. He was a big difference maker up front for the Bills. I know he's had run game struggles for folks, but he was a big difference maker as a pass rusher. And as he's been hurt, the pass rush productivity has dipped a bit for this defensive line. Rousseau is still putting some things up from a numbers and a metric standpoint, but you're just not seeing the bite and the tear from the Bills front as you were when Bosa was really rocking. And Bosa hurt he hurt his wrist in week 9 against Kansas City. Bills also lost Michael Hoyt in that game. So here are the Buffalo Bills pressure and sack rates on the year. And then after that week 9 game. So on the year, they're 15th in pressure rate at 34.8%, and they're 9th in sack rate at 7.5%. So that's on the year. 34.8, 7.5. 34.8 pressure rate, 7.5 sack rate. These are their numbers week 10, 11, and 12. Obviously not minus, but with Joey Bosa essentially playing with a club and one hand. Even though he got rid of the club, had the wrist brace and the tape, he's playing with one hand out there. Again, he got hurt in week 9. So here's their numbers week 10, 11, and 12. Week 10, pressure rate, 33.3% against the Dolphins. Not too much off from their 34.8 mark on the year, but a sack rate of 0%. Week 11, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, pressure rate of 24.2%, a good chunk off of their season rate of 34.8%. And their sack rate against Tampa was 3%, so significantly lower than their 7.5 on the year. And then week 12 against the Houston Texans, a pressure rate of 16.1% and a sack rate of 0. 16.1, significantly less than their season rate of 34.8. And obviously 0 is much less and worse than 7.5% for sack rate. Their pass rush has nosedived since Bosa has been hurt, coincidentally or not. And yeah, it's really starting to show week in and week out. Bills Are Electric said, struggles, all caps, offensive and defensive schemes. I think the Bills' talent is being held back. I do think there's obviously schematic issues. I do think there's a talent discrepancy as well. I don't think the Bills are an overly talented team. And I think they're a team that isn't overly talented that also has schematic issues on both sides of the ball. And that's why we're kind of getting what we're getting. Bob says 13 seconds was because of coaching. Ever since then, it seems it's been about roster construction and cap usage. Those areas haven't been in sync. Oof. Yeah, that's fair. What? Penguin Man says, maybe if we didn't draft 10,000 3-techs every year and just got a nose tackle at some point, we wouldn't be the worst run defense in the league for consecutive years. It's a fair point. We're going to talk about that. Oh, this is a good comment here. But Bills went full Michael Scott with the, I'm just gonna mesh / same body type defensive tackles / ignore wide receiver even harder. Yeah, just like Michael Dayton Pam's mom. Good times. Joey says, seeing D'Amico Ryans on that interview has me so pissed. The head coach is explaining how dumb our game plan was just pissed, man. Yeah, for those who don't know, D'Amico Ryans, he does like a weekly sit down like podcast style interview with somebody official for the Texans, I believe. But he talks scheme and structure and a lot of good stuff. It's awesome to see. And what Joey here is referencing is D'Amico Ryan's talking about all the 5-man protections that Houston saw against the Bills and how that was surprising because they usually don't get a lot of that. They get teams that go more 6 and more even 7-man protections to deal with their front, and how the Bills didn't do that and how they thought that was a bit surprising. And what's also fun, if you watch the film room, we talked about how not only were the Bills going with a lot of 5-man protections, but they were going with 5-man protections where they would use one of their guards to kind of jump out or meet the spy for the Texans defense. Sometimes it was Henry Toto. Most of the time it was Al Shair, number 0. But so essentially you get like the 4 down front plus that aggressive spy. On the snap, Edwards or Torrance would jump out to meet that spy who's just spying for Allen. So you would take that guard out of the protection and essentially just create even more one-on-one. So instead of, 5 offensive linemen for 4 rushers, it would be 4 offensive linemen for 4 rushers. So you literally just went one-on-one, man for man against one of the best fronts in football with probably the best edge rushing duo in the league, with Spencer Brown having one arm and getting hurt more throughout the game and leaving him in there. The game planning was awful. We're going to talk about that a bit in this episode as well. It's not good. Robert says, even with Cook, it's about creativity, which Brady has shown he cannot do. Should bring Dable back as passing coordinator or interim. Ooh, I have reservations about Dable, but I understand the thought there. Charles says, as a Bills fan that went through the drought era, it's tough. I love all the division titles, but we have to get at least one with Josh no matter what. I just want one no matter what. I don't care who's the quarterback. I don't care how it comes. I just want one Super Bowl before I leave this earth. Man, I just want one. I just want one. Jeffrey says, our OC and DC have no answers. Dable and Frazier could figure it out, and players always got better. These players have peaked. No one is getting better. I think some players are getting better, but I feel your notion on, the current coaching staff not being to the level that you want them to be. I also think it's funny, and I'm not saying you're this person, Jeffrey, but I think in the same line of like the Diggs comment from earlier, it's funny to see how like in the moment, like I remember so many people hated Frazier and Dable and wanted them gone, like similarly to kind of how people are calling for Joe Brady's head. People are doing that for Dable and Frazier. It's funny, like time heals all wounds, and the further you get from things, it's just, or the further you get away from the emotion of it, more perspective comes in and you're able to kind of see things clear. And I think, I see people, you're not the only one in saying this, Jeffrey. I see people on Twitter talking about Dable and Frazier, people saying that on Blue Sky too. Like I get those comments in addition to the Dig stuff. It's funny how everything comes around, and time heals all wounds or adds perspective, however you want to view it. Penguin Man says, I feel like pretty much the entire team is just filled with meh, from basic and predictable schemes to drafting players that don't have the highest ceilings and fit into the same mold. I love that comment. That's a good one. We're going to keep going with it. Oh, really good comment here. So talking about the Thanksgiving tree looking good. Thank you very much. I really like this garland. It's like orangish and reddish, very fall-like. It's got some different colored leaves on it. I'm really digging it. Should be for next week. I'll probably take the little tree and move it, and then have the bigger Christmas tree with the white fake snow on it probably there. So I'll probably update for that for the background next week. We'll see. Joey says, McDermott has destroyed our powerful offense. We were a high-flying, nonstop locomotive, and now we're driving a Prius. I don't think this was all McDermott. I don't. And I also think the changes they made, we're going to talk about this more later, but I think the change in direction that they made offensively made a ton of sense. The best offenses in the NFL were operating off of running the football, condensed formations, bigger body types to kind of blur the lines between the run and the pass. You saw these teams going into that world. Hell, I mean, for everybody who's talking about, oh man, like I love what McVay's doing in the Rams offense. I see this a lot from Bills fans. It's understandable, and not even just Bills fans, but most fan bases, especially if your team is struggling. All the love for McVay this year and all the love for Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator for Seattle. Both of those teams use heavy personnel and don't go spread a ton. The Rams are using 13 personnel a bunch. The Seahawks are using 22, 21, and 12. Like they're using AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo as tight ends. They're using a true fullback. They're going under center drop back. Like their run game isn't good, but people see the throws and the explosives to JSN and some of the stuff with Cup, and their passing game is good, but a lot of the best offense, and this was years ago, started moving towards condensed formations, reducing their formational width, weaponizing 12 personnel, bigger bodied 11 personnel. Again, the Rams were kind of at the forefront of that too. The Rams and the Lions several years ago that kind of were in the forefront of this movement. The Rams had Puka and Cup and like Demarcus Robinson was last year. I forget who was their wide receiver 3 a couple years ago, but both of those receivers, Cup and Puka, could block their butts off. And then you go to Detroit a couple years ago, and it was like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds at wide receiver. Dude, and Amon-Ra is sick. Obviously, he's a great pass catcher and route runner. He's a dog as a blocker. Josh Reynolds was this bigger bodied, thicker type of wide receiver that could catch a little bit, but also could mash nickel corners and safeties. The Bills changing their offensive identity in 2024 was very much in line with league trends. The best and better offenses in the league all moved in that direction. They went away from spread them out, chuck it 30 to 40 times a game. And a lot of them moved towards, again, reducing formational width, getting the run involved, tying it together or marrying it with the pass and winning with personnel and formation and alignment. The issue with the Bills is they got so predictable with that and didn't build on their 2024, and now they're kind of just dead in the water. But I'm going to dive into that further as we go forward. But this offense is built for the modern day NFL. And it's also funny how it's built to shred defenses like the ones they have, and yet they chose to go with this defense conversation for later in this episode. But yeah, I think they moved the offense in line with league trends. They just got so predictable and didn't build or evolve with their initial success last year. And that's why we're seeing the struggles that we're having. But we're going to continue to go on that. K. Mori says, so ignoring one tech for right now, what hypothetically available wide receiver offseason move would have worked out? Pickens, DK, Adams, right and wrong answers are both welcome. Pickens is just too volatile. Obviously, he's got talent, but he's a head case. I wouldn't have wanted Pickens. Devontae Adams, I would have taken in a heartbeat. The issue I'm seeing with Devontae Adams, though, I see some folks who are talking about like his cap hit this year is only like $12 million, and then comparing that to Curtis Samuel's cap hit or Josh Palmer's cap hit. Devontae Adams, I looked this up and I want to make sure. Devontae Adams signed a 2-year, $44 million deal with the Rams this past offseason. His cap hit next year is $28 million. So it's a bit different. I see people throwing out, oh, look what his cap hit is in 2025. Yeah, but his 2026 cap hit is crazy. Devontae Adams was the one for me, not even just because you listed him here, that I was really hoping for. A true man beater, a true craftsman, still a very good wide receiver, even with the miles on the tires. And you're seeing him pay off for the Rams. Like his release package work, his stem work, his deception, his work on the break. He's still got some shake and some juice to him. He doesn't have this crazy long speed that he had in Green Bay, obviously, but he's still got the short area burst and quickness. Man, like it would have been Adams for me. DK, I think gets a little bit temperamental, and so that can get worrisome, especially with them coming off the Diggs fiasco and from a personality standpoint. So he wasn't going to work. Pickens wasn't going to work. I think Adams was the guy for me with what they could have done. But such is life. RJ says, Ant, make me not sad about this team. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm doing that or not, but I apologize either way. RJ also says, oh, loving the Thanksgiving tree. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Bob says, the emphasis has been to raise the floor, but the ceiling of most isn't that much higher. Charles saying, a lot of talk about the Rams team build, stars and scrubs, but they also missed the playoffs 2 times between Super Bowl appearances. I'd take that all day if you told me we could get one title, but it's worth nothing. Yeah, I would sacrifice anyone and anything on the Bills to get a Super Bowl. I would. If you told me they had to trade Josh Allen today, but it would get them a Super Bowl next year guaranteed, I would trade Josh Allen immediately right now. Whatever it takes to get a Super Bowl. Like, even if it means you're terrible for the next 10 years, just get one. That's me at this point. I need it. Connor says, I literally fell to my knees when a coworker told me that Diggs was traded. Had to have an emergency call with my brother because it felt like someone died. Dang. Tristan says, Kincaid, 5th-year option, a guarantee given his inability to stay healthy. Oh, good question. For me, it's not a guarantee at all. For the Bills, I think it's closer because they kind of have to, given how they're built and their lack of other options. But for me, no, because of his inability to stay healthy and because he's limited in how they can use him because of his blocking ability or inability, however you want to label it. Bills are electric says our cap for 2026 is negative. Bean needs his draft picks. As also, and again, 2026. So a 28 million Devontae Adams cap hit, or however you tried to structure it, was going to be a problem. What else? Man, I'm seeing some funny things. Yeah, K Mori referenced it earlier when I said dip. Yeah, nosedive might be appropriate. That's fine. That's fair. Tristan says, I hope Justin Jefferson wants out this offseason. Benny says, good news. We always hit on our first rounders. Man, some of these negative comments are funny. I like it. Yeah, Charles talking about too. Yeah, how about D'Amico Ryans in an interview saying the quiet part out loud about the predictability on offense? I think Kalen Bullock, the Texan safety, also said something similar about how like everything they studied was literally what they saw in the game. I think some of that is product of the short week. You don't have a lot of time to install new stuff or build, but yeah, they're just kind of predictable. Ah, this is a good comment. Lucy Goosey says, were the problems during the Houston game there when we put up 44 on Tampa? Offensively, yeah, they were struggling to run the ball, and their in-structure pass game was still wonky. Allen was just making the high variance plays that tipped the scales. I also think they had a little less predictability because of the Allen high variance plays. But they struggled to run the football, and the in-structure pass stuff wasn't necessarily there. It was a lot of yin and yang. I don't want to say sugar high Josh Allen, because I think people think that negatively, but it was just those high variance plays that swung the pendulum significantly in their favor. Not to mention, you had a return touchdown from Ray Davis, and you had a lot of really good field position that swung some things and changes things for you. So I think they had a good game script that kind of worked to give the offense some success, but it really was just those high variance plays that swung the pendulum for them in that game. And again, Tampa's defense is banged up. They've got some dudes that are hurt. Jamel Dean goes down. They're already missing Kalijah Cansey. They don't have a ton of outside edge rush presence or pop, so you have no problem going 5-man protections at times. They're a bit slower at the second level, especially David's a little longer in the tooth. Dennis isn't a speedy linebacker. They're nowhere near the speed and violence of Al Shire and Henry To'oTo'o. They don't have the outside corners of Lassiter and Stingley. So I think there were the problems that you saw for the Bills offense against Houston. I do think they were still present against Tampa, but they're magnified further when you're playing a better defense and arguably the best corner tandem in football and arguably the best edge tandem in football. Dusty says, Harrison and Walker seem like they have a lot of promise. Thankfully, Walker's going to be a stud. I hope Walker, I don't want to be too negative. I don't think Walker is this stud in the making that a lot of people are making him out to be. I think he has a lot more struggles than people care to notice. It's funny when I post things on plays on social, and someone will notice the person next to Walker getting blown up and call that person out, but not call out Walker when he's getting blown out the gap or turned around or knocked upfield. I do think Walker's been good this year. He has surpassed my expectations. And I do think he's improving on his anchor and overall run defense. But I don't think he's been some game wrecker this year. I hope, as he gets into a proper role and there's more around him, he'll continue to improve. But I'm a little lower on him than others are, though I do think he has played well. Oh, I like this from Heather. Heather says this team has a dull blade. That's a really good way to say it. All right. I'm seeing going through. Oh, Jeffrey says, how are you cooking the turkey this year? I'm just straight up doing the oven turkey. My wife has done the turkey in the past. I am doing the turkey. Well, we've combined. I'm doing the turkey this year. I've done deep frying in the past. Not doing that this year. I'm okay with the deep fry. I know some people swear by it. I'm really just a standard, let's season the hell out of it. I'm rocking the butter and all my herbs and seasoning and all that stuff, getting a good rub in there, taking care of it. But I'm really just a simple, season it, make sure it stays moist. I hate that word. And then cook it regular, in the oven. I'm not a crazy, let's deep fry it or flash whatever. I know there's a lot of science to cooking turkeys. I'm a very simple, season it properly, get it in the oven, let that bird bake, and rock from there. Oh, this is a good comment here. I'm guessing you say meeting Joe Marino. Had a good observation earlier saying Bean is focused more on the floor than the ceiling in terms of roster construction. To a degree, I think Walker's a ceiling pick. I think Hairston's a ceiling pick. I think Greg Rousseau was a ceiling pick. I think Cole Bishop was a ceiling pick. Free agents, I think it's more floor. I'd have to think of it off the top of my head, but that's fair. That's an interesting comment. Um, hmm. uh, I like this comment. Ant, when are you getting a third tree? The Bills haven't won a Super Bowl since you only have two come January. Also, maybe it's on me. I need to get a third tree. I like that. Oh, I like this comment. This says hit that like. Yes, please. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. Please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like if you have not already. Yes, and so these two comments, one from Dusty saying the Bills' offense last season was pretty good. Then the comment right after saying they caught up to us because we didn't change. That's exactly it, and that's what we're going to dive into after I get through some more comments here. Question: do you buy the notion circling the fan base right now that Bean and McDermott are bottom 5 or 10 in the league? I think that's crazy, but is there a light I'm not seeing here? No, I definitely don't think they're a bottom 5 or 10. I think McDermott and Bean are easily top half of the league in like coach and GM individually and duo. It's just a matter of if they do enough to get you over the top, or if they're built to more get you out of a rut than they are get you over the top and get a championship. I do think on the whole, Bean's moves have been sound and been solid, especially in free agency. Like, it's not his fault Von Miller tore his ACL and that wrecked their plans for that year. It's not his fault Trey White tore his ACL the year before. It's not their fault that Bosa got banged up this year. Now, you could say, well, it is their fault a little bit because they haven't brought the right guys in at those premium positions to kind of buttress that, yada, yada. You can play devil's advocate for a lot of it, but no, I don't think they're bottom 5 to 10 in the league at all. I just don't think they're top 5. I think they're probably around, for me, like 15 to 12, somewhere in that range, borderline top 10. If I wanted to really broad brush it, I'd say like 15 to 8. What else we got? Okay. Oh, we got super chat. So sorry. Really appreciate you being here. Brad at Guitar. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm reading everything correctly, everything being lowercase is throwing me, but I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. And the comment or question, I should say, is any of the current long-term commitments you think will age poorly based on opportunity cost? The one that comes to the forefront of my mind is Rousseau, because while I like him and I think he gets a lot more hate than he deserves, I think they paid him like an edge one, and I don't think he's truly an edge one because of what he is as a pass rusher. And I know some of the metrics show well for him at times, but I just don't think he's an edge one as a pass rusher. So if he doesn't continue to improve in that way, you paid a lot of money for a dude who's just a really good run defender at the edge, and that's a lot of money for that. I think Bernard's could look bad. I do think a lot of his struggles this year are because of his injury, but he's never been this big, take on blocks type of dude, complete linebacker. He has to succeed in a very specific manner, and that could get worrisome, I think, as that contract ages. I think Benford's contract is fine. He's not too expensive at all, and I don't think he's been as bad as people are giving him flack for. Shakir's contract is fine. But the biggest one for me out of the ones especially like the ones they committed to recently, for me, it would be Rousseau if he doesn't continue to improve and kind of become more of a true overall edge one. And I think Bernard, just based off of how specific the ecosystem has to be for his success. Yes, as Joe says, we need some more creativity and tendency breaking. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jason says, please tell me that lamp on your right the wife put there. No, I put that lamp there. I like that lamp. Oh, wait, this one. Yeah, that. Oh, I'm so terrible at this. That one. Yeah, I put that there. It used to be my grandma's. I like that lamp. Yeah, I love a good deep fried turkey with a side of house fire. That's why I don't do it. I've heard too many horror stories. But I like the deep fried turkey, but it wasn't enough for me to risk burning everything down. Okay. I'm going to dive into some of the topics here. This first one that I want to talk about, and feel free to continue to put in comments. I will get to everything as we can go. This first one that I'm going to talk about here is the run defense. I've talked about this before throughout the offseason. I've talked about it throughout the in season last year and how it was a bigger struggle and pain point that people realized. Turnovers in game script glossed over the run defense struggle so much for this defense, even to the point that I remember folks telling me stopping the run doesn't matter. They're fine. Stopping the run matters tremendously in a vacuum, as we're seeing, especially with how the league has started to move in that direction. But as I've said before, how you fit the run determines your coverage on the back end. Simple example, if you have to have 8 in the box to stop the run, that means you can only play a single high coverage. That means you are either playing cover 3, that means you are playing cover 1. It hurts how much you can disguise, everything on that back end, right? So how you fit the run determines your coverage on the back end, first and foremost. And then with having the safeties that the Bills had, living in a single high world was not ideal to start the year. It's gotten better this year, but still kind of a problem. But turnovers changed so much for the Bills last year, and game script changed so much. In games where teams were able to kind of stay in, even from the first game of the year against the Cardinals just kept running pin and pull and counter, and they gashed the hell out of the Bills in that opening week 1 game last year in 2024. The Bills made some course corrections, adjusted, obviously got the win in that game. But that continued throughout the rest of the year. Games where teams were able to keep it close, more often than not, they ran the ball successfully against the Bills. Now, I know the idea at that point, and I think there is some credence to this, of they invite the run because they value stopping the pass more from a metric standpoint or schematic standpoint. I think there was some validity to that. But having to use numbers and having to gap out to stop the run last year was a problem for the Bills. But when they did it, it worked. The Lions game is a good example. Right? They got run on a ton by the Rams. Those back-to-back weeks are a good talking point for last year. They got run on a bunch by the Rams, started to sell out and use bodies to stop the run, which then got them gouged in the pass. And then the next week, they sold out with numbers to stop the run again, 8 and sometimes 9-man boxes to stop the run. They do that against the Lions, score early, get up and ahead early, which stops the Lions from running the ball. Granted, the Lions passed the ball a ton in that game and almost came back and won. But when they would gap out, when I say gap out, have a man in the box for every gap that is present. So not just even numbers. If there's 7 blockers and you have 7 defenders in the box, you have a hat on a hat, but you're short a gap. However many blockers there are, there's one more gap than how many blockers there are. So just think, if you have a 5-man surface, you just have the 5 offensive linemen, left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. You've got the outside shoulder of the left tackle, inside him. You just keep going all the way forward. If you are all the way through, if you've got 5 blockers, you've got 6 gaps. If you've got 6 blockers, you've got 7 gaps. So when there would be 7 blockers, which means you have 8 gaps, and the Bills would have 8 defenders in the box, they were good. This year, they've started to struggle with that a bit more. They've been inconsistent with their gap integrity. You've got multiple guys in the same gap. You've got guys getting blown out of their gaps, and it's causing issues at the second level. So they haven't been good in their run fits schematically, structurally, or individually, and they've struggled. But turnovers and game script mattered a lot for this team last year. They would get run on. The ball would get moved on them and moved up and down the field against the Bills. Then they'd get a turnover, or they'd get a negative play. They would get a tackle for -3 or -4. They'd get a sack. They would create some sort of negative play that either led to a field goal for the offense or created a turnover. They'd get the ball back to their offense and they'd score. They'd be up 14-0 or 14-3 or 21-6. And before you knew it, the opponent was like, oh, we can't keep running the ball. So game script, turnovers, and negative havoc plays were their best friend last year. And that glossed over a lot of the run defense struggles. We're not seeing as many negative plays created by the defense this year. We're not seeing those turnovers and those takeaways. And they're just getting gashed in the run over and over again. And when we talk about how we got here, it starts with the positional archetypes they choose and the philosophy/identity they have on that side of the ball. Again, the run defense was a problem for the Bills last year, yet they leaned into the exact body types and positional archetypes paired with the same philosophy and identity that wouldn't do anything to fix the run defense. And yes, injuries have mattered, right? And the suspensions. Hoyt being suspended and then being hurt. Ogunjobi being suspended. Ed Oliver being out. Daquan Jones being out. Dwayne Carter, I didn't expect much from him, but him going down, he's probably better than the practice squad guys you were bringing up, I think, but obviously not a huge difference maker. Maybe enough to not have Jordan Phillips on the field, who I'm not trying to call for anyone's job or head. You can't have Jordan Phillips on the field. If there's even a 0.1% chance of an offense running the ball, you can't have Jordan Phillips on the field. Like, he is just getting destroyed against the run. He had a really nice pass rush rep against Houston where he drove the left guard into Mills' face, but he's just getting people moved a ton. Like, you can't have him in there to stop the run. He should not be on an NFL game day roster at this point, but he is for the Bills for whatever God knows reason. But I recognize the injuries have played a role on the interior. TJ Sanders missing time, Bernard being hurt, Milano being hurt. I recognize the injuries play a role, but the larger conversation point is, even if the Bills were 100% healthy, especially in their spine, they were going to struggle against the run. It wasn't going to be a matter of if in 2025. It was always a matter of how much. And again, that's given the body types and skill sets they have inside. You built an entire interior out of guys who struggle against double teams, who struggle against displacement, smaller linebackers who don't excel at getting off blocks. That's something that's killed them this year, especially with Bernard having, a knock to his lower body and his mobility being limited. He is a sitting duck at the second level. His strength is not stacking and shedding and meeting offensive linemen, shock, shed, get free. He's all about beating offensive linemen to the spot, processing, reading, and then having the mobility and the short area closing ability and trigger to beat them to a spot, get out in front of them, avoid the block. He can't do that because he's playing essentially with one leg. Dudes are getting to him, attaching to him, and he's getting wrecked. But that's symptomatic of the guys who are healthy too. Block deconstruction as a whole is an issue for this defense. They are bad at it. When I say block deconstruction, I mean how you take on blocks, right? The Bills let linemen get into their chest. They give up, surface area and body type. Like, they just get attached to and they get mauled. Houston's a great watch, but when you juxtapose their defense and their block deconstruction with a team like Houston's, it's just that much more magnified and under a microscope. You're watching Henry Toto and Al Shire and EJ Speed and even, Jalen Reed, they're like third or fourth string safety, let alone the defensive linemen. You're just watching them attack blockers violently. They're using their hands. They are moving. They are shocked. It's shock and shed as they're reading the track, and they're moving. Their hands are in sync and in unison with their feet. They're attacking blockers. They are bringing violence. It's clinical and violent at the same time. You're not getting that from the Bills really anywhere across the board on the in their spine. As Joey says, Lassiter coming in and shooting gaps. God, Kamari Lassiter coming in and just blowing up Reggie Gilliam twice on those blast counters is absolute beauty. He weighs 180 pounds. Gilliam is 244. And Gilliam's hitting him like he ran into a brick wall. And that was Lassiter just coming in, bringing his shoulder and shutting the door, right? That's not necessarily block well, he's blowing up the block, but it's not really block deconstruction. Like the rest of their guys, even their backup interior dudes, again, getting their hands involved, not letting guys get to their chest, get to their body, lean into them, create lean and push and drive. They're just stacking and shedding and using their hands and being a pain in the butt to block. You don't get that with the Bills. Their block deconstruction as a whole was always going to be an issue for this team, as was their inability to just overall get off blocks and struggle against displacement. And for those who don't know what displacement means, I just mean getting blown off the ball, right? Like if you're sitting in this gap and you get knocked over two more gaps, you got displaced. Or if you're sitting at the 35 and the double team knocks you back to the 40, you got displaced. Displaced is just an easier word for me to say for getting blown off the ball. The Bills get blown off the ball a bunch. Left, right, backwards. It happens. It's a problem. And that was always going to be an issue this year because of who they have on the interior. Larry Ogunjobi is not some anchor against the run. Ed Oliver actually is pretty decent at it now, especially considering his size, but that wears on him a lot. Daquan Jones has miles on the tires, and even as we've seen, Ed goes out, Daquan starts playing 3-tech and does pretty sweet at it. You know why? Because even Daquan Jones, who's their starting 1-tech or was supposed to be their starting 1-tech, he's still more of a 3-tech player. So he's more of a 3-tech. And he's still kind of a good anchor, and he reads blocking schemes, but he's a little older. He's got miles on the tires. He's got injury concerns. He gets hurt. Larry Ogunjobi has never been an anchorer or a guy who can stand up against a double team. TJ Sanders was not that guy. Deion Walker's not that guy, although he's arguably been the best at it out of everybody in the interior this year, which is crazy to say. their run defense was always going to be an issue. But then I keep going back to the draft rumor of Tyreek Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State, who has gone to the Lions, one tech, plugger, athletic. I think he can play a little bit on third down and give you some juice to knock some dudes back, but he is more of a run stopper than he is anything. And he says that the Buffalo Bills told him if he was there in round 1, they were going to take him. He gets taken 1 pick before by the Detroit Lions. The Bills end up taking Max Hairston. But it's so funny that they were going to take Tyreek Williams in a thought where you're like, okay, they do want more of that one tech. Okay, so we're sitting there on day 2. Maybe they go Alfred Collins. Maybe they're looking at a bigger body, on day 3. Like maybe we're getting a one tech. And instead, they go the exact opposite direction and they get TJ Sanders and Deion Walker. And I wanted to read some stuff that Brandon Beane said after night 2, after rounds 2 and 3 of the draft, when he was asked about TJ Sanders. So after Beane took Sanders, he was asked about, kind of just taking Sanders and what he thought of him as a player. And he said, quote, and these are all quotes from him. I just have them chopped up. He mentioned inside rush, mentioned that he can play one tech, but is primarily a 3 tech. He liked the idea of adding another inside rusher to pair with Ed Oliver on clear passing downs, and we could still play him at one tech if we wanted to. That was always questionable, especially because he played at like 290 pounds in college. You don't want that as a one tech. But the idea that they saw him as that isn't wrong for their defense. Like their one techs are smaller, but that's the type of interior presence and interior defensive line they were building. A world where TJ Sanders can be considered a guy who can play one tech for us. And if you've watched TJ Sanders this year, he's getting displaced like crazy. So the idea that he could play one, given his college tape and his weight and his skill set and his traits, crazy. Like to me, I didn't think that made sense at the time. I thought it was more coach speak or gamesmanship than anything, but it looks like it wasn't. Then, this is a very interesting quote. Beane, right after that, he was asked flat out about the run defense hurting from 2024 and about adding another one tech to help with that and how TJ Sanders doesn't really sound like that type of guy. And Beane's exact quote, as I'm about to read, he says, quote, again, best football player. It's harder to find inside rush than a 2-down nose. Those are easier to find. Those guys, you can go in free agency now and find those. Guys with inside rush, if you go down the pecking order of what D tackles make, those guys up top, they know how to rush. Okay? It's all about inside rush for Beane. That's his philosophy, and I think that's McDermott's philosophy as well. And my issue with that at the time and now is that I don't necessarily disagree with that notion. I don't think the idea of leaning into inside rush on the interior is a horrible philosophy. You can still win with that. My issue is, and as Joe says, oh, really? Then where are 2-down run stuffers, Brandon? That ties into my thought. Just because you think that, like inside rush is your way, that doesn't mean that all your guys on the interior have to be all inside rush guys. You don't have to go only that way to only that end of the spectrum to swing the pendulum all the way to the left. You don't have to do that. And to Joe's point, and like I have in my notes, if 2-down noses are so easy to find in free agency and you didn't get one, that to me would mean that you didn't care to add one, because for them, they don't value that skill set because it's inside rush over everything. If it's so easy to get a 2-down nose and you can just go find those guys there in free agency, right? Then why don't you have one? Well, if it's easy, then that means you probably didn't want it. If something was easy or something was free and you didn't grab it, you probably didn't want it. And on top of that, again, you build your interior purely as inside rush. To win like that, like I talked about in 2024, you need a game script to help you out, or you need run fits to be immaculate. You need them to be clinical and timed well and proper leverage and attacking blocks and shedding blocks. Or you need for your interior defensive line to be so good as rushers and penetrators that it balances out the pure run defense displacement mitigation piece that you don't have. A good baseball analogy, and I use this a lot. Joe, you're going to know this one, but I flipped it because I think it makes more sense. if you're not going to have any power hitters in your lineup, so you're not going to have any slugging percentage guys, you're not going to have any home run pop dudes, and you're only going to go for guys who hit for average, your lineup better be full of dudes that are hitting 300 and above, and they better steal some bases. And the Bills' interior defensive line was never going to be that. If you're only going to build with inside rush, if you're only thinking penetration and rush and penetration and rush on the interior, those dudes all better be horses. They all better be guys that are like, you know what? Everybody on the interior is going to have like 5+ sacks. And we're going to have a couple guys that are like double-digit sack guys. If you're going to build that way, they all have to be dudes on the interior like that because you are siloing yourself. So if you're only going to do one thing, it's like anybody who plays a video game too, if you're building your character, like if you're not putting on armor or worrying about defense, okay, well then like your attack and your offense better be immaculate. You want to be a glass cannon, then you better be the best of glass cannons. If you're only going to focus on this one thing, you better be a 10 out of 10 out of that thing. And they weren't going to be this year. When everybody was healthy, when everything was good. And again, I know injuries have screwed them over, but what I'm talking about, and that's funny, Joe, I cannot break down into water polo, but that's very funny. Even if everyone was healthy, even if everything worked out for them on the interior and nobody missed time, or just, I shouldn't say missed time because part of it is tied to that. If everybody was as what they wanted them or hoped they would be, Ed Oliver at the top, he has injury concerns. But even if you remove that, when healthy, he's a very good player, but he struggles with inconsistency. Ed Oliver at his best has been a game wrecker and then kind of goes absent for 3 games, 2 games, 4 games. Then he might have 2 where he's just a monster, and then he goes absent for 1 or he goes absent for 2. Like that's the type of player he is. He's very good, but he's not some monster on the inside. Daquan Jones, miles on the tires, injury concerns there, potentially because of the age and because he's been banged up the past couple of years. But even if he was healthy, he's not the monster that he was in previous years. Larry Ogunjobi is very much, he is what he is. Not a run stuffer. He's a penetrator, struggles against double teams. I think he's fine as like a rotational 3, more of like a 4 to me. He is what he is. So your top 3 of known quantities was Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and Larry Ogunjobi. And then after that, it's 2 rookies and a second-year Dwayne Carter. That's what you were banking on. And Dwayne Carter was borderline cuttable last year, unfortunately. And TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, the odds of them coming in and just being dudes right off rip were low because it's hard to know that for any rookie. Like, and that's not just like, yeah, but their skill set or their fit, that was really never going to happen. Like you came into the year being like, we're all about inside rush. We're all about penetration and havoc. And then you look at who was probably going to be there on their line. It just didn't make sense. That is an interior defensive line that is built to get pushed around against the run and not good enough to dominate with penetration and rush to make up for it. And also, I wanted to talk about something in that quote that Bean said. He said at the end of that, his comment on the defensive tackle market, he said how guys at the top know how to rush, right? At the top of the defensive tackle market. And that's true. But his comment is a bit disingenuous because the majority of those dudes at the top of the defensive tackle market, yes, they know how to rush, but they're also good run defenders and or just monsters or complete defensive tackles in general. Here's the top 12 defensive tackles ranked by average annual value right now. And if you want to rank them by total value, it's similar guys, right? At the top is Chris Jones, who is more penetrator and pass rush than anything, is not a good run defender. I'll give you that, right? Then you've got Milton Williams, second for the New England Patriots. Penetrator, inside rush, also plays the run well. Did it in Philly, does it for New England. And then after him, here's all the rest of the dudes on that list. Even if Jones and Milton Williams were pure rush and didn't offer anything from a run defense standpoint, which Jones really doesn't anymore, Milton Williams does. Here's all the guys after them. Zach Allen, Nnamdi Madubuike, Alim McNeil, Quinnen Williams, Derek Brown, Jeffrey Simmons, DeForest Buckner, Daron Payne, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams. That is a ton of run defense capability mixed with inside rush capability. And if we continue to go down the rest of the line in the top 15, you get similar thoughts as well. So, yes, the dudes at the top of the defensive tackle market can definitely rush the passer. They're also just complete defensive tackles that are also good against the run. Especially again, like Jones is the biggest outlier in that top 12, because especially at his age, too, right? He's more just penetrate, rush, QB. But in Milton Williams, similar in that mold, but definitely plays the run and is good against the run. But everybody after that plays the run really, really, really good. It's not even a question. Zach Allen, Nnamdi Madubuike, Alim McNeil, Quinnen Williams, Derek Brown, Jeffrey Simmons, DeForest Buckner, Deron Payne, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams. Yes, there's some different dials and some different sliders for each guy, right? Some of those guys might be more run defense than they are pass rush. Some of those guys might be more pass rush than they are run defense. But all of those guys are essentially complete defensive tackles. So him saying, yeah, if you look at the top of the defensive tackle market, those guys at the top, quote, know how to rush. Yeah, they do. They also know how to play the run. They also know how to play the run, just like they know how to play the rush. The dudes at the top of the market are just overall complete defensive tackles. They are very good overall. They are not siloed in their skill set. Now, are any of those guys pure nose tackles and just pure run stuffers? No. Right? No. Because you do need to rush the passer from the inside if you want to be paid like that. But if they're not deficient as run defenders like the Bills' interior defensive line is. So I find that to be a bit of a problem. And again, tying that into that whole quote, we just talked about the top of the market and the inside rush, and those guys know how to rush, yada, yada. But again, going into, it's harder to find inside rush than a 2-down nose. Those are easier to find. Those guys, you can go in free agency now and find those guys. You didn't. You could have had Roy Lopez, who went to the Lions. You chose not to. So if it's easy to find those guys, and if you had an issue with run defense, and it's an issue, not flip that. If you had an issue with run defense, and it's easy to find the guys who can help you with run defense, and you choose not to bring those guys in, that to me signals you don't care about run defense. And then if you add in the other quotes and the guys that they brought in, it all signals to they didn't think they needed to stop the run. Their biggest issue as a defense last year, their biggest and most glaring issue as a defense, they chose not to address it. They leaned harder. To go to that joke that was mentioned earlier, I forget who said it. It's Michael Scott dating Pam's mom in the office when she's like, Michael, I forbid you from dating my mom. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to date her harder. That's what the Bills defense did. Hey, Brandon and Sean, you guys need to kind of get after some run defense a little bit and get away from some 3-techs. You know what? No, I'm just going to lean into 3-techs harder. They built their entire interior out of that. The Daquan Jones play this year is so funny because he, again, was their starting 1-tech, and he's been good when healthy. And what he's been largely for this team, Daquan Jones has been good. But him as their starting 1-tech, he is still more of a 3-tech in his skill set and his size. That's the kind of interior they built. And Deion Walker, huge mountain of a man, has improved as the year has gone on in his anchor and in displacement mitigation and how he handles doubles. But even him as a monster, he's still a penetrator. So that's how they chose to build their interior. And again, you can choose to lean that way. But the fact that they leaned so hard and didn't care to do anything, not even one bar of armor, you're not going with any armor at all. So if you just get hit once with any type of weapon, you're done. Like that, you're just going pure glass cannon. That's extreme. And again, if you're going to go pure glass cannon type of build, you better have weapons that you can just one hit or quitter type stuff when you pop somebody. If you're a boxer and you got a glass jaw and you can't take a punch, you better have the deadliest uppercut, haymaker, jab, something, and you also better be the quickest dude out there so you can duck and move, dive, dip, duck, dive, and dodge, and make sure you don't get popped. And they don't have that. They have a glass jaw and are capable of getting knocked out at any moment, and they also don't have a deadly haymaker or deadly uppercut. And they're not the quickest, and they don't have great head movement and feet to avoid getting punched. Oh, that's a good analogy. I thought of that in the moment, too. I should have wrote that down earlier. That's what they are. Same thing with the baseball one. And then, to Joey's point, as he says, and small linebackers. And then on top of that, again, yeah, you've got small linebackers who don't excel at block deconstruction. You don't have all pro dudes at the second level or big thumpers that are like, oh, who cares if an interior offensive lineman gets through? Our linebackers will take care of it. They can't. Even when Terrell Bernard is healthy, you don't want him taking on blocks because he's got short arms and he's small. Same thing with Matt Milano. And then their technique in block deconstruction is bad. So you've got guys who just don't fit the run defense in any way. Like, you got guys in the interior on the defensive line who just get pushed around and moved, and you've got guys on the second level who can't get off blocks. And then you've got guys on the interior and the defensive line in general who also just can't get off blocks. Like, whoa, what do you do? And Bill's our elector says, who can talk to Sean about the roster construction and get through to him? I don't think it's just about Sean McDermott. I think it's about Bean. I think they are in lockstep in how they want to build this team. Until I hear otherwise or see otherwise. Maybe McDermott wants a one tech. Maybe Bean wants a one tech. Maybe it's one of them or neither. I don't know. I don't know what happens behind closed doors, but it just seems like they're in lockstep in how to build this roster defensively, and it's causing problems for them. It caused problems for them last year, and it's causing problems now. And the last point I'll say on this, I think it's hilarious. They revamped their whole offense, right? Condensed formations, running the football, bigger body types at wide receiver, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 21, 22. It's all built because they saw the trends in the NFL and said, you know what? We got to start to mash. We got to start to run the ball a little bit, right? They built their offense to murder defenses like theirs. So they saw the trends offensively in the league and said, you know what? We have to build our offense to be like that. And then they looked at their defense and said, no, we'll stay the same. What? You built your offense knowing how the league is trending. You pivoted completely in one offseason, very impressively. Like, they deserve kudos for how they pivoted last year and what they did. But how can you build your offense in that way and then not try to be the antithesis of that or build to stop that defensively? If you are building an offense to run the ball and mash teams because those are the trends in the league, how are you not building your defense to stop the run in any way? And because that's what it is. It's not just that they're not good against the run. They're horrible. They're at a historic level for yards after contact because they're a poor tackling team, but also because they can't get off blocks, because they're getting displaced, because they can only get an arm or a shoulder on guys at times, because they can't get their full body, because they can't get into the gap. And then they're also unsound in their technique and how they're fitting the run and whether they're doing 7-man spacing or 8. And the coverage is on the back end. And it's all a mess because you just avoided run defense. And that I think that's what's so frustrating with all of it is they don't need to be amazing. You don't need to be top 5 run defense, top 10. If they could be, that would be great. They just need to not be 32nd to 28 in like everything, which is what they are right now. And their metrics were decent last year, especially from like an EPA standpoint, because again, the negative plays balanced it out. The takeaways, the stuffs, the tackles for loss, all that stuff kind of balanced it out. They were living on the extremes. It was live by the sword, die by the sword. It was either get gashed and give up 10 or 15, or get a takeaway and get a stop for like -3, -4, -5. It wasn't, you had a lot of ebbs and a lot of flows. It was a roller coaster. It was that. This year, you're not getting the balance and the roller coaster. It's all just down. But that, again, is a result of how they built this team because they chose not to address the run defense in any way, shape, or form. And I find that frustrating as hell because, again, I'm not saying, I saw this happen and look at me. I talked about it all offseason. I said why I wanted Tyleik Williams more than I wanted anybody else at defensive tackle. I talked about why I wanted Roy Lopez, why they needed to change things on the interior and who they brought in and what they did and the rotational bodies and all that. And instead, they just went pure glass cannon, pure penetration, pure inside rush. And they neglected the run defense piece completely. And it's biting them severely. And again, I understand the notion. I'm not saying the philosophy or that roster construction build is completely wrong. I disagree with it, and I wouldn't build my team that way if it's me. But you can still win like that. If you go pure inside rush and pure penetration, you can still win that way. But all your dudes got to be dudes. All your dudes got to be hitters. If you're going to have no power hitters in the lineup, you better have 6, 7 dudes who all hit over 300. And they don't. And they weren't going to. You weren't going to have that type of interior defensive line this year. That is not what was going to happen. And you could say, oh, maybe they're doing it for this year in the future. Cool, maybe. But you still got to balance it together somehow. And there's no balance. And it's really frustrating. And then I want to tie that in with defensive philosophy. We talked about a bit. I have this labeled here, positional archetypes and philosophy/identity. We talked a bit about the archetypes, right? On the interior, they just want inside rush. They want penetration. I read you that quote. And even if I didn't read you those quotes, you can look at how they build their interior and know. Everybody at this point, people who don't even really know schematics about football know like a 3 tech and what a 1 tech is because it's such an issue for the Bills right now. So we know they just want penetrators. They want smaller inside rush type of dudes. They want smaller guys at the second level. Fine. And even that, like if you're going to have smaller dudes at the second level, those dudes better be violent. I use this term a lot because I think it's super applicable. Like certain teams just have velociraptors with how they play. The Texans have a defense filled with them, but it's not just like, oh, Anderson and Hunter or like Stingley or Lasser. It's Alshire. It's Henry To'oTo'o. If you're going to be smaller linebackers, your dudes better be violent. They better be quick mentally, quick physically, violent, and strong on their technique because they are undersized. And if you have undersized linebackers in today's NFL where running the football matters and heavy personnel is coming back, if they can't get off blocks and because they're small and their body types hurt, you're done. They don't have that. So again, positional archetypes at interior defensive line, positional archetypes at linebacker, positional archetypes at edge. They want compression guys. They want power guys. They don't look for athletes. They don't look for bendy, turn the corner type dudes. They look for compression. I want to tie that in with philosophy because the guys that they bring in are tied to what they want to be from an identity and philosophical standpoint on the defensive side of the ball, schematically. They want to be a one-gap, penetrating type of defense where the front 4 is the engine of the team, where the front 4 provides a lot of the pass rush pop and juice and does a lot against the run. Honestly, like all jokes aside, they want their defense to be what the Texans defense is right now. It's got to kill Sean McDermott to see them lose to the Texans the way they did, how the Texans are built. The dudes they have up front, like, again, it's Anderson and Hunter that stir the drink. Tim Settle, as everyone's joked about, has been really good for them. But you have Sheldon Rankins on the interior. Number 72, whose name I can never pronounce, he's been a good depth guy for them, and he's been impactful on the interior. You've got a front 4 where you can just let the front 4 hunt. They can cause problems against the run, and then when you get into passing down and distances, they eat, and they're a problem. Like, that's what the Bills want. They always want to have 7 in coverage. And they don't want to have to do a lot of, like, simulated pressures or creepers. They might show guys in the A gap and mug and then drop out. They don't want to blitz. They don't want to do a lot of crazy stuff or creative schematic stuff. They just want to, hey, we're going to play a bunch of coverages. We're going to play some cover 3. We're going to play some quarters. We're going to play some cover 6. We're going to play some cover 2. We're going to play some Tampa 2. We'll mix in some man. Okay, but we're dropping 7. We want to play coverage. We just want to rush 4. That's not a horrible identity in and of itself. I say this all the time, and I say this to kind of set this up. I've said on the show before, me individually, that's not the type of defense I gravitate towards. I am they're a 4 down, over front, even front, drop 7 guys into coverage. Give me a 3-4. Give me, if anybody, I say this like it's so long ago, like the Dick LeBeau Steelers or the Rex Ryan Ravens, give me, I am a 3-4 zone blitz, fire zone type of dude. Give me match coverages on the back end. I want hybrid body types so I can drop some dudes into coverage. You don't know who's rushing from where and what's happening. And I want violence and triggers everywhere. That's not what anybody has to do. There is not any one right way to build a defense, build an offense, or build a winning football team. That's why there's a multitude of trees, coaching trees, schematic trees, philosophies, identities. That's why there's not any one right answer. But I say that to say, like, just inherently, Sean McDermott's scheme with who he is now is not what I gravitate towards. Ironically, I gravitate more towards Sean McDermott's mentor in Philly, Jim Johnson. If anybody knows anything about Jim Johnson and his time in Philly, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but Jim Johnson was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles with that time with Andy Reid, even a little before that too, I think. But Jim Johnson was a 4-3 defense guy, but he was a blitzer. He was an attacker. That's why guys like Jeremiah Trotter and Brian Dawkins like were hitters for that defense. Like Hugh Douglas, guys where you had dudes who could win up front, but they were nasty, they were mean, they flew around, but they played on the front foot. They attacked. They came forward. And Sean McDermott's defenses throughout his coaching tenure have done that. But I think Sean McDermott, and I've said this before, and I have some specific pieces for it. I think Sean McDermott wants the Bills to essentially just be the 2015 Carolina Panthers, where it's not overly complex schematically. Now you can like negatively say that because they're not creative, where it's not overly complex or creative schematically, where they're constantly playing coverage, dropping 7 into coverage, where they're relying on their front, specifically the front 4, to play the run so they can have the numbers advantage in coverage, right? They want to win that way. The problem is being that type of simplistic defense. And I don't want people to think simplistic means bad. But when you are just a coverage-based defense, or you are not overly complex schematically, you're not winning with scheme and structure, and you're not manipulating protection schemes and attacking, when you're just relying on your dudes, that's fine. But you have to have a loaded defense or dudes that are built for that. And again, that type of identity and that type of defense works better when your defense is loaded, like the Carolina Panthers defense was in 2015. That's the team that had one loss. They went to the Super Bowl against the Broncos. Unfortunately, that Panthers defense ran up against the Broncos defense, and the Broncos defense did better against the Panthers offense in the Super Bowl than the Panthers defense did against the Broncos offense, though they still did very good. Now, here's some of the players that were on that 2015 Panthers team. You had K'Wan Short, second team All-Pro defensive tackle. He had 11 sacks that year. Luke Kuechly, first team All-Pro, third in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. Thomas Davis, another linebacker on that team, first team All-Pro. You had 2 first team All-Pro linebackers on this team. Josh Norman, first team All-Pro corner, fourth in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Kirk Coleman, safety, made the Pro Bowl. Then the other non-stars on that defense were an up-and-coming Shaq Thompson, a prime Star Lotulelei, who, all Bills jokes aside, was a monster for Carolina when he came out of Utah. Charles Tillman, Bears legend, who was still functional at that time in zone, vet leadership, sound and coverage. Charles Johnson, monster defensive end, was hurt that year, but then came back and had 3 sacks in the playoffs, 1 in the divisional round championship and in the Super Bowl. This defense as a whole had 4 All-Pros on it, and 2 guys finish in the top 4 for Defensive Player of the Year. And one of them was Luke Kuechly, who's viewed by some as arguably the greatest linebacker of all time. You don't have that here. And I want to grab this. I don't know, this comment here from Rage Dog, I'm thinking that's how I'm pronouncing it, who says, we have plenty of dudes on the Bills. Benford, Milano, Bernard, Hairston, Bishop, Oliver, Hoyt, and Bosa have all shown they are dudes when they're healthy. When I say dudes, I mean like top tier guys at their position. None of those guys that you listed there are that. Respectfully, I think all those guys are good football players when healthy, 1,000%. I don't think they're dudes in the perspective of top tier guys at their position. Bosa, when healthy, I think can still be a top 10 edge rusher in this league. And I think he was showing that on tape and in the metrics before he got hurt this year. But I don't think, no. You're saying they're all pro level in game records? No, they're not. Christian Benford, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Max Hairston's an all pro level corner right now. Cole Bishop's an all pro level safety. Ed Oliver, Michael Hoyt. I love Hoyt. He was one of my prime free agent targets for the Bills this year. Now, I don't know if it's a troll or a joke, and I don't want to make those assumptions. I just don't think I think those guys are all very good football players. Good to very good for some of them. But they're not like dudes how I mean it. They're not top tier guys at their positions, especially when you're comparing that to the names I just rattled off for the Panthers defense. I think again, as people referenced last year with the Eagles defense that wrecked the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And it was like, oh, that's the type of defense you got to play. That's a defense that had a ton of really good football players, especially on the defensive line. Like you just had wave after wave of guys who were a problem. And then again, Zach Bond was an all-pro linebacker. You had Cooper DeJean and what he did, and Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay and everything you got. And then you have a tremendous defensive coordinator kind of building it all up. Like the Bills defense from an identity and philosophy standpoint is a 4-down over front nickel defense for the most part, even though they have started to do more base looks as teams have gone bigger. And they've started to even experiment with some of their fronts. They've gone with some more 5-down fronts. They've started to do some more like Dorian Williams as a Sam linebacker on the end of the line of scrimmage type of deal. And they mixed in some different things. They've even gone with some under fronts this year where you're putting the one tech to the strong side of the formation. But they are built in their identity and their philosophy to play coverage and just let the front four do its thing. And they don't have the type of front four for that. And when you don't have, you can either win with talent or you can win with scheme. It's the whole, Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's type of deal, right? You can win with Jimmys and Joes and or you can win with X's and O's. It can be either or. But if you don't have the talent advantage, you have to win schematically. You have to be so sound or creative or complex to kind of throw games on its head or throw opponents on their head. And the Bills don't have that. And so you have that type of less complex identity combined with a positional archetype philosophy of multiple positions that make you inherently deficient at an important aspect of football. And that's a recipe for failure. The struggles that we're seeing with the defense, we got here because of their philosophy of how to build the roster, their positional archetypes, and because of how that ties into their schematic identity and philosophy. I don't know which is first. I do, if we're playing chicken and egg, I think first comes the scheme, structure, philosophy, identity, and then comes the positional archetypes. But that's essentially where we're at right now, where that's where you're operating. That's where you're going. And I think they need to change in that regard. I will say, since Sean McDermott took over the defense, I know obviously they had a ton of points put up against them or on them against Tampa. I do think they've done some fun stuff in coverage, and they've been better in coverage. Less spot drop, more matching, tighter coverage. I think they've been better in that regard. It's just been unfortunate that that's occurred with a dip in the pass rush, largely because of Bosa's injury and some of the injuries up front overall. But Bosa being banged up has been a huge problem, and Hoyt going down. And that's even why I was excited for Hoyt when he came in, because I like his skill set and what he can do and the type of player that he is. But I thought it signaled they're going to start to operate differently. And they did to a degree with Hoyt. But if his type of skill set or traits are so important to elevating your scheme and structure, you have to have multiple guys who can do that. And they don't. And it's just unfortunate. And then you get to a spot where, again, like I am not, I know we're fans of this game. But at the end of the day, like I know they get paid millions and they're in the public eye and all that stuff, but it's like these football players, like it's still their job. So I'm not one to ever, call for someone's job or say they should be cut or be released or whatever. Like I'm not that guy, but it's wild to me that Jordan Phillips has seen as many snaps as he is, especially in a run defense standpoint. Like, and I know you can't always game it up. You can't only put him out there for pass reps, but he's just not serviceable in any way against the pass. And the fact that they would see a guy like that of his level at this point and his skill set and his traits, the fact that they would see that guy and think he's capable of starting multiple games for them and being a regular rotational guy, I think tells you all you need to know about their ideas on their philosophy and on how they want to build from the interior out. And again, that's using the interior defensive line as a focus, but it extends. It all goes throughout the grouping. And I just think hanging your hopes on one aspect of football is a rough way to go. And again, injuries have 100% been an issue. Bernard being hurt has impacted the way he plays the game. The interior defensive line issues have been an issue. Bosa goes down. Greg Rousseau was hurt to start the year. AJ Epinesa has a shoulder injury now. Like, there's all these things are kind of adding up. Hoyt goes down. Like, there are 100% injuries, but even when everybody's at their best and healthy, Ed Oliver was sweet. Again, like Ed Oliver, both the games he played looked great, but we know what we've seen in the past. The question has always been, you get those flashes from Ed Oliver and he follows them up with disappearing acts. So he'll have a game, he'll have bunches where, 4 sacks in 3 games, or 4 sacks in 2 games, or 3 sacks in 3 games, or a bunch of TFLs or good plays in the backfield. And then it's all of a sudden like he's ghost and you don't see him at all. Sometimes it's in high profile moments in the playoffs. Sometimes it's just for multiple stretches during the regular season. And that was going to be your top tier guy who had the least amount of questions about him. It's just worrisome on that defensive side. I think they need, I've said it, I think it's still more tweaks and alterations, but they need to do something different from a positional archetype and philosophy and identity standpoint on the defensive side of the ball. They can't just keep operating in this manner. It's too high variance. They're too dependent on other things to maintain defensive success at this point. And it's tough. What else? I don't think I have any other. Yeah. So this is the defensive side of the ball. We're going to flip to the offensive side now in a minute. And again, I don't want to make it seem like the Bills don't have good players, right? The Bills have good players on the defensive side of the ball. And I do think some of the down years that we're seeing from guys aren't necessarily indicative of who they are. But I think they do have to change some of their archetypes and their positional archetypes and the type of body types they gravitate towards and skill sets they bring in addition to some of the identity and the philosophy stuff. That's not to say they don't have good players. I do think they have good players. I don't think they're completely devoid of talent. I don't think they have like S tier, top tier defenders. I don't think they have a bunch of game records or game wreckers on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think they have all pro candidates on the defensive side of the ball. But they do have good football players, and I think they can be a good defense. They just need to be more well-rounded and not play the ends of the extreme. And again, injuries are important. I do think that if they were completely healthy for the entirety of the year, they would be a much better defense, like you could say for a bunch of teams and a bunch of units in the league. But when healthy, they were always going to struggle against the run this year. It was just going to be a matter of how much. It was like, are they going to be bottom 5? Are they going to be bottom 10? Like, what are they going to be against the run? Can they score enough to have game script help them out again? Are they going to continue to get turnovers? Can they penetrate and shoot gaps enough to get negative plays and force teams into known passing situations? It was more of how can their best way to stop the run was going to be ancillary things to stopping the run. It was going to be other things. How can you cobble together the run defense rather than just how do we stop the run? That's how they were going to stop the run. They weren't going to stop the run by stopping the run itself. They were going to do it by winning in other areas to try and force teams away from it, if that makes sense. And I just don't think that's sound because it makes you so dependent on a multitude of other avenues to stop this one thing. That is a pain point for how you operate, not only as a defense, but then how you operate as a team as a whole. Oof. Oh, question here. Is it fair to say Oliver needs a reliable running mate to be consistent? I think it's a really good question. I think more of it's on Ed, but yeah, I do think the odds would increase if he got a consistent dude next to him. Even just, he doesn't have to be, I don't think he needs an all pro next to him or some stud next to him, but if he can just get a reliably good football player against him, like even what Daquan was, 2 seasons ago, where he kind of looked like an all pro for a couple weeks. If he can just get a consistently good player next to him, yeah. To your point, if he gets a reliable running mate, yes. I would prefer that guy be more of a true one tech or be more of a complete guy. He doesn't have to be a pure inside rush winner. He doesn't have to be a pure run stuffer. I think if Ed plays next to a more complete defensive tackle or just a dude, obviously that'll work well. But I just think if he gets more of a not consistent, more of a complete defensive tackle next to him, that would go a long way. He needs somebody next to him who just has some kind of run defense in his skill set and isn't bereft or devoid of talent or isn't skewed severely to one side of the pendulum. And then he followed up by saying, "Am I crazy for thinking Deion Walker can become that dude?" I think there's hope. That if you would have asked me this in the offseason, I would have said yes. But with his play this year, I do think there is some hope for that. I would like to see them deploy Deion Walker in ways that aren't just him being a one tech. I think he could potentially become that guy, but you're really seeing him kind of dip in the other areas. But I think Walker could become that guy. He's just off this one season. I've said it before, like he surpassed my expectations for this year as an overall player, but even as a run defender. I thought his run defense was going to be atrocious. It has not been. He's worked on his anchor. His block recognition has improved. I think he needs to be better at using his hands and his length and needs to be better at block deconstruction and improve some surface area things. So much of it for Walker is, like it or not, is tied to his build. Like he's so tall and he's not very bendy. Like he's going to be at a leverage disadvantage against most interior guys just because of how he's built, right? So weight, he's going to have to constantly manage his weight, manage his health physically. He's going to has to make sure he's in great shape because anything that's tweaked or moved in the wrong way could be a problem for him. But I don't think he's been this stud this year that people are kind of labeling him to be. But I think he's having a solid rookie season. He surpassed my expectations. I think he could become that dude. I would like to see him have more positional versatility and get used a little bit more like he was at Kentucky. But if he has to be that one tech, I don't think that's a horrible notion to kind of put him next to Ed. But I would like more of a run defense skill set in there. I think Walker right now is still like, when he came in, I thought he was like 90-10 pass rush to run defense. Now I think he's more like 70-30. I would like somebody on the interior that's more like 55-45 or 60-40 at worst. But I do have hope for Walker. That's a very good question. Okay, let's move to the offensive side of the ball. And I labeled this one verticality and fear from the wide receivers. And when I say verticality and fear from the wide receivers, I mean that from a defensive perspective. I talked about it earlier. We saw the Bills offense successfully pivot their entire offensive identity last year. Condensed formations, bigger body types. We're reducing formational width. We're going to run the football. We're going to get to 12 personnel. We're going to use jumbo. We're going to use 6 offensive linemen. We are going to mash. We are going to get Matt Collins in there and Keon Coleman in there. We're going to people move dudes, and we're going to run duo, and we're going to run these 3 to 4 run concepts, and we're just going to crush teams, and then we'll pass as we need to, right? So that was their identity. They pivoted. As the season went on, early, like the Baltimore game last year, the Houston game last year, teams started to find the Bills offense out a little bit. I said it last year and I said it similarly this year. If you were a team that had good and or athletic corners, you could play single high coverage against the Bills because the threat of getting beat outside and or deep was low. So defenses would start to do that. They'd play a bunch of single high. They would try and stop the run. They would force the Bills into 3rd and long or, known or true passing situations. And then they would game up their protections and they would cause problems for Allen. We saw that last year, particularly the Ravens game and the Houston game. So the Bills went out and they got Amari Cooper because they were like, we have a problem. We need a bucket getter on the outside. Let's get Amari Cooper. Cooper flashed that a little bit. Wasn't necessarily himself. He also got hurt. Was kind of the answer, but also kind of wasn't. But you saw that last year in your offense. You saw, hey, we have a really good run game. We're winning with formation and alignment and personnel, but things are starting to get wonky for us if we don't have threats on the outside. If we can't win on the outside, things are going to get tight and tough for us as an offense. You knew that last year. Okay. So you come into this come into this offseason, and all you do is you add Josh Palmer and you don't really address wide receiver at all. Teams again started to find the Bills offense out last year, and the Bills did very little to combat that. They did very little to push defenses back, make them back off, and make them have to account for being passed on vertically and or outside the numbers. Again, those teams with good or athletic CBs could give the Bills problems because it meant defenses could play single high and crowd the box and or line of scrimmage to stop the run. They could flood bodies in between the numbers, in between the hashes, make life difficult and be like, yo, good luck with your guys on the outside trying to beat our guys on the outside, right? And the Texans, the game is an extreme example of that, right? They have an amazing corner tandem. Kamari Lassiter is like one of the best CB2s in the league, borderline CB1 now, like low-end CB1. Stingley, if not for Pat Surtain, Derek Stingley for me would be hands down the best corner in football. So that's a horrible matchup for the Bills. They're just locked down, period. But we saw struggles earlier in the year against Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis, right? Which is why Dalton Kincaid is so important, because you get Kincaid matched up on linebackers or safety. He's the mismatch creator. He's the guy you want to take advantage of and get the ball to vertically and or for explosives or chunk plays, because it's either coming for him or it's coming from Shakir on a wide receiver screen and he breaks some tackles and he does some stuff. You're not getting guys on the outside who can win or separate. You don't have these bucket getters on the outside. And you knew that could be a problem last year. That's why you traded for Amari Cooper. And so they recognized, hey, we need a bucket getter. And they tried to get one. And instead of trying to secure that for 2025, and I mean like really securing that, instead, and this is no disrespect to Josh Palmer, because I like Josh Palmer or what he is as a player. Instead of really securing that bucket getter, they added a career wide receiver 3 who could spot duty as a wide receiver 2. That was their answer. And that's not cutting it. Josh Palmer, I've said it all year, really good at winning in the underneath and the low intermediate. He's good in his route stems. He's good with deception. He can win vertically off of a schemed route or even sometimes with deception. But people overblew his deep threat ability because of some of the metrics that show. But there was blown coverage. There were things that were kind of in his favor that weren't like him being a true burner, truly beating someone on the outside with just like running by somebody or being a vertical threat, take the top off the defense type of vertical guy. That's what I mean with verticality. And so that was their answer for like, oh, here's how we'll improve the wide receiver room. And I do think as an overall wide receiver, Josh Palmer is better than Matt Collins. And you could even make the case that Josh Palmer is better than the banged up Amari Cooper they got, but they needed more than that. And on top of that, they refuse this year to incorporate the wide receivers that they have with speed, which are Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore. Now, I don't think either of those guys are the slam dunk answers to their wide receiver problems for a multitude of reasons. But Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel are the Bills' only, or have been on paper, the Bills' only shot at a vertical element to their pass game. And then you look at them individually. Curtis Samuel has injury concerns and can never stay on the field. And Elijah Moore was a late, almost panic kind of ad. So that to me, again, if I'm trying to read the tea leaves a little bit, if your two main speed guys are a guy who's hurt a bunch and doesn't really stay on the field, and the other speed guy is a guy you added last minute, that to me signals like you don't really care about that element in your wide receiver room or in your offense. And you needed that. You needed verticality in this offense, and or you needed bucket getters. And you didn't do much to set yourself up for bringing that in 2025 and building upon 2024. And this is where it ties into the predictability and what Brady has done. Oh, I got to stop because you got a super chat. Ali, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the super chat. Ali says the first sack was Allen's fault. Turned down Knox open plus late to his read of Moore open in the end zone. The other 7 sacks all occurred in the second half after Brown's injury and forward directly him getting beat. Negligence from the coaches, ? Exclamation point. I do think, I said this during the game and I said it after, you could see Spencer Brown was laboring. There are multiple drives where he gives up a sack and he comes up holding his elbow, like barely able to use his arm. And Anderson knew it. Hunter knew it. But you were just watching Anderson beat him around the arc and going through that right arm and that right shoulder. And Brown couldn't do anything. Brown couldn't punch with that hand, couldn't push. He could barely lift it past like his chest. So I do think it was leaving a guy out there who's clearly hurting. Like there's a difference between someone being hurt and someone being injured. Brown was injured and they left him in there. And not only did they leave him in there, but they kept putting him on an island. So it's not even like, okay, like you can still go and gut it out, but we'll give you some help. They left him in there on an island. I think that's rough to leave an injured guy in there who's clearly injured and also like is injured to the point where he's hurting the team. You got to make that call and get him out for his benefit and also selfishly for the team's. And at the very least, you have to give him some kind of help. You have to give more chips. You have to line up the tight end to his side and create some interference or obstruction for that edge. Or again, just chip out of the backfield and release. Like do something. You got to give some kind of support. Or stop bringing your guards out to attack the spy and have Osiris Torrance stay in to give help to Spencer Brown. Like you do something. They didn't do anything. They didn't change anything schematically. They just kept doing the same thing and they kept getting killed. Even Spencer Brown having one arm wasn't enough to change them from doing it. So yeah, I don't know. Negligence is a strong word. I think that's fair. If you want to say negligence, malpractice, whatever, like I still think that's crazy. He was clearly hurt. And they didn't even not only did they not take him out, they didn't even give him help. They just let him rock out there with one arm against the best edge, arguably the best, if not the best edge rushing tandem in the league. They just let him rock on an island. Like, that's crazy. Crazy. Yes. So, as I was saying, really good comment there, Ollie. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. That's a good question. So as I was mentioning with the speed, the verticality, not building, this is where it comes into the predictability and things for the offense. So much of the conversation lately has been the predictability and Brady just leaning into the same concepts. If you're, counting at home, the run concept stuff like blast counter, which is a concept I love that they added this year. The way they run it in their presentation has become so predictable. Now it's getting found out and it's getting stopped all the time. Their run game is getting found out because they run the same concepts from the same type of presentation. The pass game, as everybody knows now, they run mesh a ton. They run double China a ton. They run Hank, which is curl flats a ton. That's their three like bread and butter. And they run wide receiver screen, which they do a ton. And they run it as drive starters. They run all of these as like their drive starters, their feel good middle of the drive stuff. The gotta have it, high leverage moments on third down, fourth down, low red zone, like stuff that you need. They run the same stuff. And yes, there's different, like mesh has multiple versions. You got mesh rail, you got running back mesh traffic, you have more of a traditional mesh, but it's still mesh and teams know it's coming. And they've gotten so predictable in their concepts and their sequencing and their situational football offensively. And that's a problem, right? But even before that, you came into 2025 running almost the same offense as 2024. So after a year in which you had the NFL MVP and you had a great offensive year, and you had all these people applauding you for how you pivoted your offense and everybody eats and all of that, right? All this success. And knowing that because of that success, there is going to be a target on your back and people are going to study the hell out of you instead of building or evolving or tweaking or adding layers. They just stood pat at who they were and what they were. Their biggest change this year has been adding that blast counter run concept and going with less jumbo, which is 6 offensive linemen, and using Jackson Hawes instead of Alec Anderson. That's their biggest change. That's it. Other than that, they're running about the same offense as last year. And then, like I mentioned, you couple that with running the same pass and run concepts over and over from very similar presentations, meaning the personnel and alignment over and over, you just stand pat. That was always my issue. I said it in the offseason. I thought the wide receiver room that they had was fine if you're going to be a run heavy, people moving type of offense. And I'm still saying that now. Like, if you want to be a spread it out, you got to chuck it 30 to 40 times. You got to win on the outside. You got to win deep. That's not what they have at wide receiver. And the lack of verticality is severely hurting them. And then on top of that, because again, everything's getting tighter. We're not scared to, if we're a defense, we're not scared to get beat on the outside. If we're a defense, we're not scared to get beat over the top. They're not pushing the ball downfield. No one's beating us downfield. No one's separating downfield. They don't throw those routes. The concepts aren't geared. The concepts aren't geared to push the ball downfield. Allen's not pushing the ball downfield. We're not scared of the dudes that they would even try to do that anyway. All of that, right? The notion that they were going to be a run-first offense, condensed formation, all that stuff, I like that. It works. But you can't just be that, because eventually everything is going to start to get tighter. Everyone's going to creep down. Everything is starting to will start to get constricted, like it did last year, like you saw, which is why you tried to get Amari Cooper. Well, you not even tried. You did get Amari Cooper. And instead they just went back to that well again this year. And we're seeing the struggles in the run game. And now you're getting teams that are tied into your tendency. And I think that's part of the bigger issue as well. I still think this offense can work running the football as their main, like, quote unquote identity. I know people don't like that. I know people are going to say you have the MVP, you have Josh Allen, you should be chucking it around, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. I still think this offense can work as a run first team. Heavier personnel, work that stuff. They do have to get healthier. Kincaid being out hurts them a ton, but I digress. They can still win offensively, but they've got to start to limit the predictability. You've got to see more under center passing. You've got to start to see more shotgun runs. There should be much more play action in this offense. There should be much more bootlegs in this offense and moving the pocket and taking advantage of Allen's legs and manufacturing some mobility for him. You're seeing teams tee off with rush lane integrity because they can manipulate the Bills' protection rules and schemes against them. That's why Allen's getting kept in the pocket. That's why they're able to figure things out. And they're winning on early downs against the Bills to get them into third and long and or third and known passing situations so they can game up the Bills' protections because they know they're likely to get a 5-man protection. They know what the Bills are going to do and how they're going to run it. And then they game up their protections. They keep Allen hemmed in. Nobody separates, and they can't win. The in-structure pass game was an issue last year, and it's still an issue this year. You cannot live, if you are the Bills, regularly chucking it 30 to 40 times a game. Can you win every once in a while like that? Sure. But it's going to take those high variance, mutant, alien, unicorn plays from Allen, which can happen, but having them happen consistently is a lot. Like you can't ask your pitcher to consistently go like 8 innings, 1 hit, game after game. Can you have pitchers that can do that? Yeah. Can Allen do that? Yeah. Can he do that every single game? That's a lot to ask. And again, it's not, I don't think they do need better guys on the outside, and they do need verticality, but that's not going away. I know they added Brandon Cooks. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. That issue isn't going to be fixed this year. But if they change some of their ratios, their tendencies, their telegraphing, their tells, that can go a long way. But they have refused to do that largely. Even when they flip to, I want to pull up this text from Kendall that he sent me because we were upset about things. Even if you want to flip and kind of do some different things and go like, okay, like we're going to try and change some of our tendencies this game. Let's do this. They still fall into other tendencies. Here's a good, Kendall tweeted this last Thursday after the game. The Bills in quarters 1 through 3. So when the game was largely close before fourth quarter stuff where they had to pass it a ton to try and score at the end. The Bills in quarters 1 through 3 against the Texans, they had a 68.7 design run rate on first down. So essentially 7 out of 10 times they're running the ball on first down. And then they had a 45.5% play action rate on second down. So it was mostly the same run sequence, quarters 1 through 3. Run the ball on first down, then play action pass until the last play of the third quarter when they went first down play action. And the Bills right now have a 57.3 design run rate on first down this year, which is second highest in the league. It says even when you tip things a little bit, they fall into other patterns. It's like, okay, we want some we want some more play action. And it's like, oh, okay, you want some more play action? Okay, we're going to do it in a super predictable manner. And it's just like, oh, like, why are you doing this? Why are you like, yes, we want play action, but why do you have to give it to us in such a predictable form? It's just frustrating. Oh, got another one from Ali. Ali, thank you for still being here. Thank you for the super chat. Ali says the Bills defense is top 5 in rush yards before contact per attempt, dead last and rush yards after contact per attempt. Poor tacklers. Taryn hits, oh yeah, Woody marks 3 yards short of the line to gain on 4th and 1 and gets dragged 8 yards, 0 physicality. Yeah, that was really rough. It was such a good fit from Taryn and good. Like AJ Epinesa crashes down. Like I thought it was a stop. I jumped out of my seat. I was like, yes. And then, like you said, Woody Marks just carries him forward. Good call there on, different sites are different on next gen. They are, 8th in yards before contact per attempt at 1.03, which is fine. They're top 10. That's good. And a significant improvement. Last year, they were one of the worst teams in the league at yards before contact. Again, because they were getting blown off the ball like this year. But to your point, yeah, they are dead last in rush yards after contact per attempt. As I mentioned, I didn't mention the official yards, but they're at 4.3 yards after contact per attempt on the rush, which is significantly worse than the Falcons, who are at 3.76. And that 4.3 is historically the worst mark in the last 8 seasons, as far back as I can go with next gen, which is crazy. Yeah, they're just, and as Ali said, the coaches can't make guys tacklers. It's pathetic. And then he said, yeah, dead last by a mile. Absolutely. Yeah, I do think there's something to be said for, not to oversimplify it, because I do think there's a science to run fits and being in your right gap at the right time and everybody doing their job and being a good tackler. But so much about run defense, tackling, but run defense in general. And players have also told me this when I've asked them about it, and you'll hear coaches talk about it too. So much of it is just a mentality. You have to want to stop the run. You have to want to run through a blocker. You have to want to tackle somebody. Yes, there's technique. Same foot, same shoulder, wrap up. If you want to do the alligator type deal, or, where you're putting your head, where you're putting your shoulder. There's new age. Like before, it used to be get 3/4 of your body in front of the guy. So if you're tackling him here, you're putting your head here. Now you want to protect the neck and head, so you want to put your head back this way. So you're getting less of your body in front of the ball, which leads to more shoulder and arm tackles. So I think that naturally leads to more broken tackles and poorer tackling. But yeah, I think so much of it is just technique and a mentality. You have to want to tackle. And you have to want to play run defense. And I'm not saying the Bills don't, but they're just so bad in so many areas of it. I love this from Ali. Ali says, yeah, I need to get some rugby coaches in to help these guys tackle. You're seeing that across the board, that the rugby style of tackling. What I mentioned now is the rugby style. Like football style is, if the ball carrier is running this way, football style is get 3/4 of your body here and get in front of them. Rugby style is the opposite. Guys going this way, you're putting only just your shoulder here because you don't have a helmet. At most you have like a scrum cap. You're trying to protect your head, your neck, your shoulders. You're trying to protect against all that type of stuff. And you have to wrap up. You can't just deliver shoulder tackles in rugby. You'll get carded for that. So everything is about wrapping up, being sound, same foot, same shoulder, head to the right side, getting your angles right, wrapping up, bringing down with force, hitting the right target zone, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I love that comment. Love that comment. Well done, Ali. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, so the struggles for this offense, I said it even during the Dolphins game when they won in week 3, I think that was, when they won 31-21. You saw that stretch where they were struggling to move the ball offensively, and they got saved by that roughing the punter, and they won that game by 10. But you saw where the defense was just playing zone, and they were like, go ahead, try and beat us. Like, we don't think you can do anything for a chunk play, so we're just going to keep everything in front of us. And the Bills started to struggle, and that's just been amplified. If they can't run the ball, they're almost dead in the water because they don't have a passing game that works well in structure and presents threats on the outside and or vertical. And it's scary and it's worrisome. And it happened last year, and they tried to fix it, which made you think, okay, well, they're definitely going to try and fix it going into this year, especially with a full season of tape on your offense and a full season of studying that defenses and opponents did. Nope. And what's a really interesting point too? I mean, everybody and their mother kind of knows they're predictable at this point now, but going back and earlier into the year, it was like you notice teams that had more time to study the Bills were gaming them up like what the Falcons did because they came off their bye, what the Patriots did because they've seen them a bunch and Vrabel has experience against them a bit, albeit in different forms. But you saw teams kind of coming out that have had extra time being able to scout the Bills and see what's up. That's what I also think when they play New England later in the year, they've seen them already once this year, and I think New England's coming off a bye the week before they play the Bills. So you need to limit your predictability because it's gouging you in a multitude of fashions. And yeah, let me see. Am I crazy? Hold on. Oh yeah. The Pats play the Giants this upcoming week, and then they have a bye and they play the Bills. So the Pats have already seen the Bills once, and they get an extra week to prepare. So if you have any type of predictability, they've already seen you once, and they have the extra week to prepare. You're just seeing so many teams kind of figure this Bills offense out. And for whatever reason, they're not doing any of the most basic, easy access things that they can to kind of pivot and break tendency to flip scripts. They're just not. I don't think they necessarily have the personnel this is where the frustrating part comes in. It's part a personnel issue. It's part a schematic and coaching issue, and it's part a Josh Allen issue. It's all the things. Josh Allen's not playing great ball. He also doesn't have a great supporting cast to throw it the way I think this offense needs to. And I also don't think Joe Brady is maximizing the pieces that he does have. Tying into that, Brandon Cooks, started watching his tape a little bit. He's not the downfield guy that he was. Majority of his stuff is like short and underneath. It's like slants and crossers and some digs and in breakers, or crossers that turn into hitches, like over the ball type sit route type of deals. I think he's a good route runner. He routed up Cole Bishop in the Saints game earlier this year, where Rattler just threw it a little short. It was initially ruled a touchdown, and then they looked at it and decided it wasn't. He had a couple good, nice routes running against Seattle and against the Bucks. I'm not against adding Brandon Cooks. I don't know how much it moves the needle. I also, at this point, unfortunately, I don't really have much faith in Joe Brady to use who he's got. Like I said earlier, I don't think Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel are world beaters and the answers that the Bills need. But I also think that Joe Brady is underutilizing Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore. Now, Samuel's been hurt, and maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know. But I'm for the Brandon Cooks addition because why not? I mean, at this point, I don't want to sound drastic. Beggars can't be choosers. But I am. I'm not overly hopeful. I think he can help. Get him on the move a little bit. I don't think he's necessarily an X like they can need. I think he can do some release stuff, but I don't want him seeing a ton of press. Get him on the move. Let him work. See if you can stretch the field a little bit with him, but I think he's more just going to win with his route running kind of in the seams and outside a little bit. I think he can, do some stuff, but we'll see. I just, and maybe it's me just kind of I don't think I'm being a prisoner of the moment actually at all. I don't think they have a ton of talent at wide receiver now or a ton of bucket getters. But that being said, I still don't think Brady is maximizing the value of the guys that he has in the wide receiver room. So I think Cooks fits in that perfectly. I don't think he's this bucket getter that he used to be. But I also don't have faith in Brady to maximize him right now. So it's rough. What's up, Brad? I feel like I don't know if you did it from earlier because I said it. I liked it, and the handles changed now. Now I can see the capitals, and it makes it easier. Yes, Brad at Guitar. Thank you very much for still being here. Thank you for the super chat. Brad says, assuming Brady goes, who catches your interest as an OC? It's tough, right? Because the good OCs that you like now are probably going to get head coaching jobs somewhere. Like Clint Kubiak from Seattle, who I really like. I think he's probably going to get some head coaching opportunities or calls or something. And if not, he's probably not going to want to leave Seattle. So you're not going to get somebody like that. So you're looking at somebody who likely gets fired. And then who do you bring them in? I'm going to say this, and I don't know if people would hate this, but I think it would work really well. I want someone from the Shanahan or the McVay tree, as I'm sure a lot of folks do. If Mike McDaniel gets fired, I want Mike McDaniel from Miami. Don't yell at me. I don't know if that necessarily work from like a mind standpoint, if him and McDermott, how they'd get along, what that would look like. But I love the idea of Sean McDermott being the head coach and running the defense, and Mike McDaniel just gets to run the offense. Yes, McDermott probably gives some input, but I think you get an opportunity just to be like, hey, run this side of the ball. I think McDaniel could do it. Um, I don't know if McDermott will let him do it. Fair question to ask. Um, but I think his run game stuff in Miami was underrated. And I think his type of offense that's designed to like create these open windows and how Allen's skill set would fit into that. Um, I would like that very much. So that's my viewpoint and or not viewpoint. That's my pick. And I'm still saying it because I think Miami kind of falters a bit down the stretch. And then if he gets fired, that kind of lines up. That's really who you're hoping at. Because anybody who's like a good hot OC right now is probably either going to stay with their team and or get a head coaching opportunity and isn't like, so they're either going to get a head coaching spot or they're going to stay where they are. They're not going to leave to be, they're not going to leave being an OC to go be an OC somewhere else. So you either need to get somebody who's a QB coach somewhere, somebody who is a good offensive mind or head coach and gets fired, like a reverse Robert Saleh situation where he was a, head coach, got fired. Now he's the Niners DC. I would take Mike McDaniel, and that is my vote. So I'm going to continue to go that route. But even if it's not him, give me somebody from the Shanahan McVay tree. Like that's where I'm at this point. I need that. I haven't. Ali, I saw your comment. I haven't watched a ton of Iowa State. Actually, no, what I have watched some Iowa State. That's interesting. I'd have to scour more from a college coach standpoint, but I would like more of a pro established name already. We'll see. We'll see. That's a very good question. I like that. Oh, that's fun. That's fun. That's fun. That's fun. Oh, Ollie, you're saying the Rams passing you. I don't know why I thought somebody mentioned something from Iowa State in here. Yeah, I'm always very well, you know what? No. Because I know how much I see even the stuff with like Liam Cohen, and I know how much like the pass game coordinators and even everybody who does the grunt work, like how much they learn under McVay. That would be fair to say. I would welcome that. The Rams pass game coordinator. I would say I got to dive into. I'm so bad at like knowing who the position coaches are, like those type of roles for the teams. Like I watch so much tape and very rarely am I like, oh yeah, this guy's the running backs coach. This guy's the wide receivers coach and pass game coordinator. But I would welcome that. He was at Iowa State. That's why I'm thinking that. Okay, cool. Because you said that and I saw the name and I was like, I'm not crazy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. He was at Iowa State last year, right? I'm not crazy. I'm looking him up. You're probably going to beat this to me before I even get there. Bum, bum, bah. Yeah. Nate Shieldhouse. Yeah, right? I'm not crazy. No, he was at Iowa State in 2023. That's the year I'm thinking of. Everything's kind of blurring together. That's fair. That's fair. I like that idea. Yeah, I would be down for that. Anybody who's tied to that tree, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Ali, you're crushing it in the comments this year or this episode. I like that very much. That's really cool. Yeah, and so that's the fair point too. You're saying he's going to get a job as an OC somewhere soon. That's the type of deal too, right? So you're either getting someone who's a head coach or who's an OC on a team where the head coach is going to get fired, so they're out of a job, or you're looking to grab somebody who is a current QB coach, pass game coordinator, something like that, and that way you can pluck them and have them get a promotion. But that's super fair. I like that. And yeah, last little piece on Cooks. I think it's a fine addition. I don't think he's the bucket getter that they need at wide receiver. I don't think adding him hurts. At this point, beggars can't be choosers, and you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. But I don't have a ton of faith in Brady right now because there's buttons that Brady could be pushing and could have been pushing to help this offense, and he's not. So I'm really frustrated with him, and I'm even more frustrated with the defense, and it's annoying. You know something I'm not frustrated with? The best pizza in Buffalo, One Pie Pizza. If you live in Buffalo and you have not had One Pie Pizza, you are doing yourself a disservice. If you visit Buffalo from out of town and you have not gotten One Pie Pizza, you are doing yourself a disservice. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. When you get different toppings, they chop them all up and sprinkle them evenly across the pie. They make their own homemade blue cheese. They have a catering division where they have all these awesome chicken and rice dishes and mac and cheeses. They make a great breakfast pizza. They make a great salad. Everything they touch seriously is phenomenal from a food standpoint. And Like I say all the time, they're really good people making really good food. I say they're really good people because all the drives and initiatives and everything that they do for the community at large. Toys for Tots, which is happening now in the holiday season. Get yourself down there, bring some toys, get some tickets to get entered and raffled in the raffle for some prizes. Partnering with the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation, Roswell, and the Knockout Cancer, all of these things that they do. It's community focused. It's really just kindness focused. They do a really good job giving back. And that's aside from just having awesome pizza and awesome food all the time. So if you have not gotten yourself some One Pie Pizza, aka Joe DeRosa, you need to get yourself some One Pie Pizza. I don't say that they're the best pizza in Buffalo because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I truly think they are the best pizza in Buffalo. So get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You would not be disappointed. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Claude, you said Ant is One Pie ship. Depends on where, but potentially yes. You should get yourself some. Man, fun times. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy this episode, if you have not already, please, 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 and then you drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. I really, we had a ton of attendance in this episode, even rocking over 2 hours, which I didn't think we were going to go this late, but I should have known better because it's me and we have a really good chat that consistently shows up for the show. I didn't know how engaging this episode would be from a holiday standpoint, from a disappointment standpoint with the team, but the chat was awesome in this episode, and I appreciate you folks going back and forth with me throughout this episode and having some good conversations, some cathartic conversations, as some of you folks have said in the chat. Some therapy here. And yeah, if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. If you enjoyed this content, I'd really appreciate it. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies about the show and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. I see the kind words that are coming through for myself now and from really a bunch of you throughout the entirety of the episode. You always know I don't pull them up when I'm by myself because I think that's corny to be like, oh, hey, look at this nice thing that was said about me. But I see all those comments and I greatly appreciate them. And again, yeah, thank you. Whatever form or fashion your support or episode consumption comes in, I'm greatly appreciative of it and thankful for it. Whether you watch live, whether you watch post live, whether you listen, whatever app you use, if you're a downloader, if you're a streamer, if you listen to it, on if you listen to it on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, the weekend, whatever your listening schedule is, your form, fashion is, I'm super thankful for it and appreciative of it. So thank you very much to everyone who, supports me in any way, shape, or form. If you had anything that I didn't get to in this episode, question, thought, comments, concerns, I apologize. Please get at me on social. If you're on Twitter, at pro__ant, that's pro 2_ANT, DM me. DMs are weird now with passcodes and stuff, but tweet at me, whatever it is. If you're on Blue Sky, at pro_ant there, no underscore there, just PROANT. Message at me, DM me, whatever you got. If you are an insider, DMing me in the Discord is the best way to get at me there. And yeah, I appreciate you folks very much. Thank you very much to Brad for your multiple super chats. Thank you very much to Ollie for your multiple super chats and the multitude of comments you had coming through this episode. Seriously, again, the chat was awesome. I didn't know what we'd get tonight because of the holiday and the frustrations around the team, but we went long in this episode because there was a lot of good thoughts and comments from you folks. I mean, we spent the first 30, 40 minutes just doing live chat comments and questions and thoughts and back and forth. So that was awesome. I love seeing you guys interact with one another, ask me stuff, follow up to me. So it was just a really cool atmosphere and energy in the show tonight, like it is a majority of the time. And yeah, thank you all for providing that. I hope you all have a tremendous Thanksgiving week if you are observing that. Enjoy the food, enjoy the family, enjoy the time off. Hopefully, if you get it, if you're off on Thursday and Friday, enjoy it. If you're just a Thursday off person, enjoy that day. I hope you folks have a great rest of your night, a great rest of your holiday week. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate the well wishes and happy holiday stuff for me that's coming through. I send it all right back to you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the rest of your week. If you need anything, get at me on Twitter, get at me on Blue Sky. And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Have a happy Thanksgiving. I will see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.